Listen to me now, because I am speaking to you with urgency, and when urgency comes from my mouth, it is never without purpose. There are things no one around you is going to tell you about what I am saying right now, because this did not come through another person, and it was never meant to. I am placing it directly within your spirit, in a place where other voices cannot edit my words or persuade you to doubt what you have heard. Stay here with me for these next moments, and do not let them disappear the way this past week seems to have disappeared before you even had time to catch your breath. Your name has been spoken in a place you have never entered, and a decision concerning you has already been made. It was made in your favor, and that is only the first part of what I need you to hear. The second part is harder, and I will not make it softer simply to make it easier for you to receive, because that would not help you. There is something in your life right now, quietly working to keep you from being where you need to be when that decision becomes visible. So what I am giving you is both a warning and a summons, because I do not want you to hear the good news and then settle back into sleep. Something can be prepared for you and still be missed. And Israel stood at the edge of a land I had already given them before turning back. I had not taken the land away from them. They allowed fear to measure what my word had already spoken. I am not telling you this to frighten you, because fear causes people to freeze, and I need you willing to move. I am telling you because you have been overlooking things that seem too small to matter, even though some of those small decisions have been quietly steering the direction of your life. Just as a small rudder can turn a great vessel and a small hinge can determine the movement of a door. You already feel some of this. There has been a pressure within you for days, and you have tried to explain it through exhaustion, money, disappointment, or the people who have let you down. But what you have been feeling is my hand pressing you toward one direction while you keep leaning toward another. Ignoring that pressure will not make it disappear. It will become heavier, because I do not casually release what I have determined to pursue in your life. So let me show you something about the way I speak, because you have been waiting for me to speak in a form you already recognize. There was a night when a boy named Samuel was lying in the temple, and I called his name. He rose and went to the old priest, because that was the voice he understood how to expect. And when I called him again, he went back to the priest again. 3 times he ran toward a man while I was the one speaking, and only when he was told to answer me directly did he stop looking in the wrong direction. You have been doing something very similar, carrying something I placed within you to another person, and asking them to confirm what I had already spoken to you. You have asked people to give you certainty about something I had already made known to you, and when they hesitated, shrugged, or simply remained silent, you treated their silence as though it were my answer. It was not my answer. It was the boundary of what they could understand, perceive, or say. There is a reason this message did not arrive through another person's mouth, because if it had, you would have measured it against their history, questioned their motives, and perhaps believed it for a few days before doubt returned. Human words can fade quickly when they enter a heart that has already grown tired. So I am speaking past all of that and meeting you where you cannot honestly pretend you did not hear me. I know you have been overlooked in rooms where you believed you should have been seen. I saw you watch people who seemed to give less, care less, and try less, receive things you had been asking me for, and I saw you smile as though it did not hurt before you went home, carrying the part you never showed anyone. Something inside you became quieter each time that happened, and I am here to speak into that quietness, not by creating more noise, but by bringing truth to the place where disappointment has been settling. There is something you have hardly allowed yourself to believe, and I want you to hear it now. You are not passed over. You are being held. There is a difference between a door that is closed because you are being kept out, and a door that is being kept for you because what is behind it is not ready yet. You have stood before the second kind of door and interpreted as the first, and every time you did, you surrendered a little more of your expectation because you thought the waiting meant rejection. I want that expectation back in you, not through empty excitement, but through understanding. Look at Gideon, and remember where I found him. He was hiding in a wine press, threshing wheat in a place meant to conceal what little food he had from raiders, because fear had taught him to protect even the smallest thing he possessed. Yet the word I sent to him called him a mighty man of valor, even though nothing about the way he was standing looked like the name I had spoken over him. He questioned it, resisted it, and asked me for signs more than once, but the name was true before he believed it, and it remained true while he was still crouched in that pit. You are standing in a similar tension right now, where what I call you and what your circumstances appear to say about you have not yet caught up with each other. Do not make the mistake of allowing your circumstances to speak louder than my voice. Your circumstances can describe what is happening around you, but my voice speaks to what I have decided. You have made mistakes, and I will not pretend that you have not, but neither will I allow those mistakes to become the excuse that keeps you standing still. I knew every failure before I ever spoke your name, and what I am doing in your life was never based on the expectation that you would perform flawlessly. I was looking for your willingness, not your perfection. Willingness is a much smaller thing than perfection, and it is what I have been asking of you all along. So stop standing there rehearsing every place where you failed and using that old record as though it were the only record that exists. That list belongs to what has already happened, and it is not the document I am working from. There is another record with your name on it, and it does not read the way you have assumed it does. Stay close now, because what I am about to show you is something many people never learn to recognize, and it will help you understand much of what these last 2 years have been doing within your life. If you believe me, say it plainly now. Amen. There is a room you have never stepped into, a place where decisions concerning your life are settled before you ever have a chance to see them. You cannot enter that room, and you cannot stand there and plead your case or try to change the outcome with your own words. But your name is known there, and something has recently been released from that place that has not reached your door yet. That is why you have felt different lately, and I know you have struggled to explain it. You are not exactly sick, and you are not exactly sad, but there has been a strange awareness within you, like the way you can sense someone standing behind you before you ever turn around. That feeling is not simply your imagination running too far, because you are sensing the nearness of something that has already begun moving toward you. I want you to understand how carefully this has been arranged, because you have developed a habit of believing that you are always an afterthought. I remember a widow in Zarephath gathering 2 pieces of wood outside the city, preparing what she believed would be her final meal before she lay down and died. She did not know that provision had already been appointed for her, because before her hunger reached its deepest point, I had already spoken to a prophet and directed him toward her. Her provision was arranged before her crisis reached its worst moment, and she simply had not encountered it yet. That is where you are standing right now. The assignment came before the meeting, and the meeting comes afterward. The space between those 2 moments is where many people surrender because waiting can feel like abandonment when there are still things being put into place. Now listen to the harder part, because there is a way to lose something that has been assigned to you, and it is not simply through praying too little or making too many mistakes. Sometimes it happens because you speak before something has had time to take root. You feel a stirring, receive a good report, notice a small opening, and immediately carry it to someone who has never really known how to celebrate what is growing in you. You place that fragile thing in front of them, and then you study their face, waiting for their reaction to tell you whether what you sensed was real. When their expression does not brighten, something inside you cools, and what was beginning to grow takes a wound it never needed to carry. I am asking you to stop doing that for now, not because you must live in silence forever, but because there are seasons when what I am forming in you needs to remain protected while it is still tender. Think about Joseph. When he was still young, he was given a glimpse of what his future would hold, and he brought that revelation to brothers who already carried resentment toward him. He was not lying about what he had seen, and what he saw was true, and in time it came to pass just as it had been shown to him. But he placed something true into the hands of people who were not prepared to receive it, at a time when it was not wise for him to share it. That decision added years to his journey, the pit, the false accusation, the prison, and the long silence of being forgotten by someone who had promised to remember him. The dream endured, and Joseph endured, but the road became much longer than it needed to be. So protect what is growing in you right now. Let it have some time in the quiet, because a seed that is constantly pulled from the soil just to see whether it is growing never gets the chance to become what it was meant to become. Silence in this season does not have to mean fear, and it does not have to mean that you are hiding. Sometimes silence is simply protection. When the right moment comes, you will not need to spend your energy explaining what happened inside you. The change itself will speak for you. There is another thing I need you to understand about the way I move, because knowing this will save you from a great deal of confusion in the days ahead. There was a prophet who ran into the wilderness because he was exhausted, afraid, and completely worn down by his own life. I told him to stand on the mountain because I was going to pass by, and then a wind came with such force that it tore through the rocks. Yet I was not in the wind. The earth shook beneath him, but I was not in the shaking. And then fire came, but I was not in the fire either. After all of that came a sound so quiet and delicate that only someone who had stopped looking for spectacle could truly notice it. That is how I have been speaking to you. You have been asking me for the wind, for something loud enough to remove every question, something undeniable enough to settle the argument inside your own mind once and for all. While you were watching for fire, I was speaking beneath the noise through that quiet sense within you that one thing was wrong and another thing was right. You felt it, but you called it a mood, and then you called it overthinking, and after that you went ahead anyway. I am telling you clearly now so you can stop confusing what you have been sensing. That quiet knowing within you is not simply anxiety, and it is not something you need to dismiss as a physical feeling. You have been overriding what I have been showing you with your own reasoning for long enough. So hold on to this, because you will need to remember it soon. What comes from me steadies you, even when it asks something difficult of you. It may lead you into something uncomfortable, but it does not drive you into frantic decisions. It slows your breathing and gives you enough light for the next step without demanding that you see the entire staircase at once. What does not come from me hurries you, telling you that everything must happen immediately, before you think, before you ask, before you take time to discern, or else you will lose it. Anything that can only survive because you rushed into it was never mine to begin with. Fear pushes you forward with pressure, but I lead you with direction, and those are two very different experiences. You already know which one you have been listening to. You are more capable than you have allowed yourself to believe, and I am not saying that simply to make you feel encouraged. I am telling you what I know to be true. I do not call people toward things they cannot carry, and I have never done that. So when you look at what lies ahead and feel that familiar tightening in your chest, when that old voice begins asking, "Who do you think you are?" understand that voice is not giving you an accurate measure of who you are. It is trying to preserve an older version of you, one that I am now asking you to leave behind. Let that version of you come to an end. It served a purpose when staying small felt safer, but you have carried it long enough, and remaining small will not fit through the door that is opening in front of you. You have also been carrying things for years that were never yours to carry in the first place. You have carried other people's disappointment, their expectations, and shame, connected to seasons you have already passed through. I am not asking you to become stronger so that you can carry those things more efficiently. I am asking you to put them down, because the strength you keep spending on them is the same strength you will need for what lies ahead. Set them down now and keep listening, because I want to show you what the waging was actually made of. You have wanted an explanation for the delay, and you have quietly assumed that the explanation must have something to do with your character. You have treated every closed year as though it were a message about your worth, as though somewhere there were a list of qualities you still needed to develop before you could move forward. That is not what happened, and I want to correct that belief before it settles so deeply into you that you begin treating it as permanent truth. You were never the only piece being moved. Other lives were involved too, and those lives were never operating according to your schedule. People had to arrive at places they had not yet chosen, and circumstances had to change inside rooms you had never entered. A door that opens for you is almost never a door that concerns only you. Look at Ruth and how her story unfolded. She was a foreign woman, poor and widowed, living in a land that did not originally belong to her. One morning she went out to gather the grain left behind the harvesters, doing the kind of work people did when they had very little, and the scripture records that she happened to come to a particular field. She had no carefully designed strategy for what would happen there. She did not know who owned the field beneath her feet, and she had no idea that on that same morning, from another direction entirely, a man named Boaz would come out from Bethlehem to look over his workers. Two people were moving separately, neither one aware of the other, and yet they arrived in the same field on the same day. Her future turned on timing she had never arranged and could never have arranged by herself. If she had arrived a week earlier, the field would still have been standing and untouched, and if she had come a week later, the harvest would already have been gathered. What she needed depended on a particular day, and that day was never hers to choose. You have been asking me to explain a schedule you were never responsible for controlling. Let that go. It was not a verdict against you. My child, I want you to hear me today. I want you to hear me today, not because you're a weight for you upon the altar of this work, like gold placed upon the scales of a calling. Let it become a seed placed into deep water, an offering set upon the stone rather than something you keep tightly in your hands because you are afraid to release it. What you release in faith does not simply disappear from your life. It moves ahead of you into the harvest I am preparing. This is an expression of your trust in my hand to provide, and a sign that your heart is loosening its grip on lack. Now let me speak to the part of you that is tired of trying. There were fishermen who spent an entire night working on the water and came back with nothing at all, not even a small catch to show for all those hours. At dawn they were washing their nets, doing what fishermen do when they have accepted that the night's work is over. Then they were told to go back into the deep and lower those nets again. Think about what that must have sounded like to men who knew that lake through their work and through generations of experience. Men who had spent the entire night proving to themselves that there was nothing there. They were being asked to undo the washing, push the boat back into the water, and repeat the very motion that had already failed them. One of them said it plainly: they had worked all night and caught nothing. Yet after saying that, he added the words that changed everything: "Nevertheless, at your word I will." That is the sentence I am waiting to hear from you. He did not have enthusiasm, and he did not have confidence. He had exhaustion, and he had his professional judgment telling him that the attempt would probably fail again. But underneath both of those things was a decision to move according to my word, rather than according to what his evidence had shown him. The catch that followed nearly tore the nets and nearly pulled 2 boats under. The fish had not suddenly appeared at dawn. They had been there throughout the night, while he was working in a place where he had not yet been instructed to cast his nets. That is what I want you to sit with for a moment. What you need is not necessarily absent. It may be deeper than the place where you have been putting your effort. You had been working in the shallows because the shallows are close to shore, and from there you can still see the ground beneath you. I am calling you farther out, beyond the place where you can still see the bottom. That is part of what trust costs, not merely an emotion or a feeling, but one movement beyond what feels completely comfortable. And I know what begins happening inside you when I say that. You begin calculating what it will require, what it might cost, what people will say, and what will happen if it does not work. Stop there. You are not being asked to guarantee the outcome, and you are not being asked to know everything that will happen afterward. You are being asked to make one movement in the direction I have named. There's something else about that morning on the water that I want you to notice. Those men were exhausted, but they had not walked away. They were still there, still handling their nets, still standing near the boats. If they had gone home in frustration when the empty night was over, they would have missed the instruction completely. You are still here, and that matters more than you realize. You have had reasons to stop listening to me, and some of those reasons were real. Yet here you are again, hearing my voice, and that tells me something about you. That is not simply stubbornness. There is something within you that never completely agreed with the disappointment. Hold on to that. It is the only qualification I have ever asked for. Now I want to warn you about a particular way people lose hold of what they have been believing for. When an answer takes a long time, the heart often begins protecting itself by asking for less. It says, "I will settle for peace. I will settle for stability. I will simply be grateful for what I already have." Sometimes that is genuine maturity, but sometimes it is something else entirely. Sometimes it is a wound that has learned to speak politely. There is a kind of gratitude that keeps a full heart open, and there is another kind that quietly closes the door so nothing else can enter and hurt it again. I know which one has been living inside you, and I am asking you to open that door again, even though opening it feels more vulnerable and carries more risk for your heart. You are permitted to desire what I promised you, and you are permitted to expect it. That is not arrogance. It is agreement. Stay with me now, because I need to show you what has been standing in the way. There is something in your life you stopped confronting because over time you learned how to move around it instead. You know exactly what I mean. You did not have to search for it, because it came to mind before I even finished speaking. And your first instinct was to defend it, which tells you how deeply it has settled into your life. It is not dramatic, and that is part of what makes it dangerous. If it were obviously destructive, you would have dealt with it long ago because you are not a foolish person. This thing is quieter. It takes a little from you and gives a little back, just enough to keep the arrangement alive. Over time, you built your routines around avoiding the one honest conversation that could finally bring the arrangement to an end. That is what I mean when I say you have been adjusting instead of correcting. When someone bends around an obstacle for long enough, eventually they forget they are bending at all. The posture becomes familiar, and then they begin to believe that the way they are standing is simply who they are. You have been walking crooked for so long that standing straight may now feel painful. I am not asking you to become stronger so you can keep carrying this more effectively. That is the request you have kept making of yourself, and it is the wrong one. Strength spent on the wrong thing is still strength being lost. Here is what I see that you have not fully seen yet. It is not only taking your time and your peace, it is also taking away some of your ability to discern. When something continually drains you, eventually it becomes harder to recognize the difference between what is right and what is merely familiar. And when you lose that distinction, you can walk straight past your own answer without realizing that you have done it. That is the deeper danger. It is not only what this thing is doing to you, but what it is doing to your ability to see clearly. Now let me tell you about a man who nearly walked away from his healing because the instruction he received offended him. Naaman was a commander, respected and wealthy, decorated and honored, yet he carried a disease that none of his position could remove. He traveled to another country carrying silver, gold, and letters from a king, prepared to pay whatever price might be required. But the prophet he had come to see never even came outside. Instead, he sent a servant to the door with a simple message, "Go wash 7 times in the Jordan." Naaman became furious. He had imagined something completely different. He expected a ceremony, a visible gesture, perhaps a dramatic act that matched the importance of the man standing before the prophet. Instead, he was given a muddy river and a number. He even argued that there were better rivers back home, and for a moment he was prepared to return home carrying the same disease, simply because the instruction did not honor the position he believed he held. His own servants were the ones who persuaded him to reconsider. They reminded him that if he had been asked to do something great, he would have done it without hesitation. So why refuse something small? He went, he washed, and he came back clean. Now let your own voice answer me, "Yes, Lord." I am telling you this because you are standing at a similar edge. What I am asking from you is smaller than what you prepared yourself to give, and that may be exactly why you keep walking past it. You have imagined a great sacrifice. You would fast for a month, move to another city, or make some enormous change because those things feel large enough to match the size of the problem you have been carrying. But the instruction I have actually given you is simple, repetitive, and requires no audience. End the arrangement, have the conversation. Stop going back to the thing you already know is ended. It is not some enormous assignment. It is a small act of obedience you have already refused 6 times. And it is the door. Now I want to speak about the people around you, and I need you to hear this carefully because it can easily be misunderstood. I am not telling you that the people in your life are your enemies. Most of them are not. Most of them love you as deeply as they know how to love you. But love and alignment are 2 different things. Someone can genuinely care about you and still be completely unable to agree with where I am leading you. Some of the voices around you are not actively opposing you. They are simply describing the limits of the world they have experienced and calling those limits reality. When they tell you to be careful, they may mean it with kindness. They are describing the size of the world they know. The problem begins when you allow the size of their world to determine the size of yours. Pay attention to what happens inside you after certain conversations, not only while those conversations are happening. There are people you can speak with and walk away feeling clearer, steadier, and more like yourself. Then there are people you speak with, and afterward everything feels heavier, smaller, and more confusing than it did an hour earlier. Perhaps they said nothing cruel. Perhaps they meant well. You simply walked away with less of yourself than you had before. That is the measure I want you to begin noticing. Do not reduce people to categories of good or bad. Pay attention to what remains in you after they have left. You do not have to make an announcement. You do not need a confrontation or a long speech. You simply need to stop bringing the most tender parts of your life to people who repeatedly hand them back bruised. That is not rejection. It is care for what I am growing. And there is one more voice I need to name for you, and it is the voice you have trusted more than any other, your own. You have a constant commentary running through your mind, narrating your life as it has for years. Much of what it says is not true. It tells you that you always begin things and fail to finish them, that people eventually become tired of you, and that every good season you experience is only borrowed time before something comes to collect it. You did not deliberately choose those sentences. You absorbed them from rooms you were too young to leave, from experiences you were too young to understand, and from voices that became familiar before you knew how to question them. Yet you have repeated those words so often that you began treating them as facts about who you are. They are not facts. They are old wounds that learned how to speak using your own voice, and that is exactly why they have sounded so convincing for so long. I want you to begin challenging those thoughts the moment they appear. Do not answer them with forced positivity or empty cheerfulness. Answer them with truth. When that voice tells you that you cannot, answer with what I have already done through you. You have lived through seasons that could have finished you, seasons that you once believed you would never make it through. Something carried you through those moments, and it was not luck. It was not your own strength alone either. It was me, and my position toward you has not changed since then. Stay with me. There is something I am asking you to release, and I want you to understand why letting it go will not cost you what you fear it will. When Lazarus came out of the tomb, he came out alive, completely alive, and yet he was still wrapped in grave clothes with his hands bound, his feet bound, and cloth covering his face. He had already come out of the place of death, but he still could not move freely or see clearly, so the people around him were told, "Take off the bindings and let him go." That is where you are right now. You were not waiting to become alive. That has already happened. But you are still carrying the wrappings of a season that has already ended. You have worn them for so long that they have begun to feel like part of your own skin. But being bound does not mean you belong to the grave, because those are only remnants from a place you have already walked away from. So when I ask you to release something, understand what I am really asking you to do. I am not taking something precious away from you. I am removing what has been wrapped around you. You keep looking at release as though it means subtraction, adding up the familiarity, the routines, the small comforts, and even the identity you built around what you are holding, and when you total all of that together, the loss feels frightening, but you are counting the cloth as though the cloth were your body, and it is not. It has weight, it may be tightly wrapped, and it may have been with you for a long time, but it is still only cloth, and it is not who you are. There is a habit in your life that once served the purpose, a way of relating to people that once helped you feel safe, perhaps even a place you kept returning to, because for a season it truly was right. Those things were not necessarily mistakes when you first took them up. They fit the person you were at that time. The difficulty you feel in releasing them does not mean they still belong in your hands. It may simply reveal how long you have held them. Do not mistake the pain of opening your hand for proof that opening it was wrong. A hand that has been clenched around something for years will ache when it finally begins to open. That pain is real, but it does not tell you whether the release is right or wrong. Now I want you to understand something about resistance, because you have been interpreting it in the opposite way. Jacob spent an entire night alone beside a river, wrestling with a man until the sun came up. It was not easy for a moment, and by the time the struggle ended, his hip had been put out of joint, leaving him with a limp for the rest of his life. Yet he also walked away with a new name and a blessing he refused to leave without. He said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That night was among the hardest moments of his life, and it was also the night when everything changed. If he had judged the meaning of the struggle only by how painful it felt while he was inside it, he could have released his grip before morning and crossed the river as the same man who entered the struggle. You have been treating difficulty as evidence that you must have chosen the wrong road. Sometimes that may be true, but sometimes difficulty means something very different. Resistance can appear when you finally reach the very thing that has been holding your life in place. And sometimes that thing does not loosen its grip without a fight. Ease is not always evidence of my favor, and struggle is not automatically evidence that I have left you. Ask yourself what kind of tiredness you are carrying. There is the exhaustion that comes from doing the wrong thing for too long, and there is another kind that comes from doing what is right before you have seen the result. From the inside, they can feel almost exactly the same. Only one of them is telling you to stop. If you believe I am with you in this, say it now, "I believe." There is something else I want you to understand about how movement begins. Abraham was told to leave his country, his family, and his father's house and go toward a land I would show him. He was given a direction, but he was not given the destination in advance. He gathered his household and walked away from everything familiar toward a place he could not even name if someone had asked him where he was going. I know how uncomfortable that feels. You have been asking me to give you the entire plan before you will take the first step, while I have been giving you one step at a time, and you have interpreted that as me holding something back. I am not withholding from you. I am moving at the pace of your trust. When you have walked a portion of the road in front of you, I give you the next portion, because a step taken in trust often makes the next step visible. That is not a way of delaying you. That is how I have designed the journey. And I know why you want the whole picture before you begin. It is not simply curiosity. You want to examine the destination first so you can decide whether it is safe to commit, because you have been wrong before, and being wrong cost you something. You quietly promised yourself that you would never allow yourself to be that exposed again. That promise is part of what has kept you standing still. Let me show you one more person, because he did something you have been reluctant to do. There was a blind man sitting beside the road outside Jericho, begging, because that was the work available to him. He heard that a crowd was passing by and that a certain man was among them, so he began to cry out. The people around him, people who could see, told him to be quiet. They rebuked him because they thought he was creating a disturbance, embarrassing himself, and reaching for something beyond what they believed a man in his position should reach for. So he raised his voice even louder. That was the turning point. It was not simply faith as an idea. It was the specific decision to keep calling out when the people around him were telling him to lower his voice. He was called forward, and there is one detail I want you to remember. The account says that he threw off his outer cloak and jumped to his feet. That cloak may have been nearly everything he owned: his bed, his shelter, and the covering he spread out to receive whatever coins people gave him. Yet he threw it aside before he received anything, while he was still blind, surrounded by a crowd, and without any guarantee of what would happen next. He moved as though he already believed there was something waiting for him on the other side of that step. That is what I have been waiting to see in you. Not endless preparation and not another season of standing still, but one act that only makes sense if you truly believe me. Stay close, because now I need to speak to you about what you are becoming and why that matters more than what you are receiving. There was a woman who came to a prophet, carrying a debt she could not repay, with creditors threatening to take her household from her. She was asked what she still had inside her home. Her answer was one small jar of oil. That was the entire visible inventory of her life at that moment. She was told to go to her neighbors and borrow empty containers, and she was given one very specific instruction: do not gather, only a few. She went inside, closed the door, and began to pour. The oil continued from one vessel into another, filling each container as she moved from one to the next. It did not stop until every vessel in the house was full, and when she asked for another container, there was none left. Then the oil stopped. Look closely at what determined the size of that miracle. It was not the size of the little jar, because the oil itself was not the thing that set the boundary. The boundary was created by how many empty vessels she had been willing to gather while all she could see was debt in one small jar. This is what I mean when I tell you that you must become able to carry what is coming. It is not an examination you must pass in order to earn it. It is about capacity, because what I am sending needs somewhere to be received, and I will not pour out more than your life is presently built to carry, because it would spill onto the ground and be wasted, and you would find yourself with less than you had before. So look honestly at the vessels you have gathered. Have you made room for anything new, or have you been asking me for a flood while keeping the same single jar sitting untouched on the same shelf, unwilling to knock on even one door? Room is made through decisions, not through feelings. Sometimes it looks like finally ending what has already reached its end, clearing away hours that are being consumed by things that bear no fruit, or bringing your affairs into order, so that an increase would not immediately disappear into the same disorder that swallowed what came before. And notice something else about that woman. She closed the door. What happened inside that house happened quietly, without an audience, before anyone in that town knew what was taking place. The increase happened behind a closed door and became visible only when she finally went out to sell the oil. That is your instruction too. Build the capacity quietly. Now I want to speak to you about the smallness of what you are working with right now, because I know it discourages you more deeply than you admit. There was a time when the foundation of a temple was laid, and compared with what had stood there before, it seemed painfully small. Some of the older people wept when they saw it because they remembered the former glory, and what stood before them looked like almost nothing beside it. Then the word came, "Who has despised the day of small things?" You have been looking at your own small day in much the same way. You see the size of what you have begun, the modest progress, the numbers that seem unimpressive, the slow and ordinary work filling your week, and you compare it with what you once imagined. Then you feel foolish, and in that feeling you have come close to walking away from the very foundation I asked you to lay. Do not measure a foundation against a finished building, because that comparison was never fair and it has never produced anything good in you. A foundation is supposed to look like very little. That is what a foundation is. There is something taking shape that you cannot see yet, and I want to name another part of it now. I am bringing people around you. Some of them are already close, and you have not recognized what they carry because they did not arrive looking important. They are quiet, they have not flattered you, and they may seem far less impressive than the people whose approval you have spent so much time pursuing. But pay attention to how you feel when you are around them. Notice whether your thoughts become clearer or more tangled after you have spent time in their company. Others have not entered your life yet, and when they do, they may not arrive with noise or announcement either. Do not rush to trust everyone, but do not close yourself off simply because you have learned caution. Use the measure I have already given you. Peace and clarity are how I mark my own. There is also a confidence I am building within you that will no longer depend upon the approval of other people, and this will become one of the greatest things I do in your life, even if right now you value it less than the other things you have asked me for. You have spent a long time needing people to confirm you, needing the encouraging word, the recognition, the reassurance that someone noticed you, because that need was there. Other people had a lever they could pull in your life, and some pulled it deliberately while others used it without even realizing they had it. I am taking that lever away. You will begin to notice that a passing comment that once could have occupied your entire week no longer reaches you in the same way. You will notice that a silence you once would have immediately interpreted as rejection simply passes through you. That does not mean you have stopped caring about people. It means something underneath you has changed. Your foundation has moved, and you will know who you are because of what I have spoken over you, and no one else gets a vote in that. And there is a reason for all of this that reaches beyond your own life. What I am doing in you is not meant to remain only with you. Think about Esther, a woman who was brought into a position she never asked for, placed in a palace at the very moment her people were facing destruction. She was afraid to act because obedience could cost her everything, and the word that came to her was, "Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" She could have remained silent and protected herself, and the story tells us that deliverance would have come from somewhere else regardless. The question was never whether I was able to accomplish what needed to be done. The question was whether she would choose to take part in it, and that same question is now before you. What I am bringing into your life will reach other people through you, and someone who is losing hope right now may look at what unfolds in your life and begin to reconsider what is possible. That is part of why this was assigned to you, and part of why the preparation has been so thorough. Stay with me. I want to show you how you will recognize it when it arrives. Here is how you will recognize that something is from me. It will not come with panic attached to it, and nothing I give you will demand that you decide before you have had the chance to think and pray. If something arrives carrying pressure, secrecy that sits wrong in your spirit, or a deadline designed to keep you from seeking me, do not call it mine simply because it looks like the answer you have been asking. What I send brings a settling with it, a certain rightness that quietly takes its place inside you and stays there. You may be surprised when it comes, and you may even feel overwhelmed by how large it seems. But underneath the surprise, there will be a steadiness in you that says, yes, this is it. It will fit your actual life too. It will not require you to become someone you are not, or abandon what you know to be true just to receive it. What I have prepared has been measured against the life you truly live, not the life you have imagined you needed to present. It may look different from what you pictured. In fact, it probably will, because the picture you have carried has been shaped partly by watching what other people received, and assuming your answer should look the same. What comes to you will be shaped specifically for you, and that means it may feel unfamiliar at first. Do not reject it simply because it arrived wearing a different face than the one you expected. Now let me take you back to Jericho, because there is something in that story people often hurry past. They were instructed to walk around the city once each day for 6 days, without shouting, without speeches, without saying anything at all, simply moving around the walls in full view of the people watching them. They were doing something that appeared to accomplish nothing, something that probably made them look foolish. And for 6 days they ended each day exactly where they had begun, with the wall still standing. Then came the 7th day. They walked around it 7 times, they shouted, and the wall fell. It did not slowly announce that it was weakening. There was no visible crack on the 3rd day to reassure them that progress was happening somewhere beneath the surface. Every day of that week looked like failure right up until the moment it became clear that it was not. You are somewhere in that week. I will not tell you which day, because if you knew, you might stop paying attention and simply coast toward the ending. But I will tell you this: the lack of visible progress in your life is not proof that nothing is happening. You have been studying the wall, measuring what you can see, and letting its appearance tell you what to believe. Look again at the instruction, and notice how much silence was required while they walked. They were not allowed to speak about it as they went. There is a reason for that, and it connects to what I asked of you earlier when I told you to keep certain things quiet. Words spoken before their time can weaken a person's resolve and talk them out of completing what they have already been instructed to carry through. Sometimes silence protects the work while it is still taking shape. There is one more thing I want you to understand, and it concerns interruption. When Nehemiah was rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem, his opponent sent for him and asked him to come down to meet them in a village on the plain. It sounded reasonable on the surface, just a conversation, just a meeting, but he knew they intended harm, so he sent back an answer that I want you to remember. I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. They sent the same invitation 4 more times, and every time he gave them the same answer: you will be invited down too, but it may not come through someone who openly intends to hurt you. It may come disguised as ordinary life, an old argument asking to be reopened, someone from a season you already closed reaching out at exactly the wrong moment, or a small emergency that belongs to someone else and could be handled without you. The requests may seem minor. Each one may sound reasonable by itself, but each one can quietly take another day from what you are building. The strategy does not have to destroy you. Sometimes it only has to pull you away from the place where you were instructed to remain. So remember the answer. You do not have to explain yourself, and you do not have to become harsh. Simply say, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Say it again whenever you need to. Now hear the last thing I want to place in your heart. You are not forgotten. You have wondered about that more deeply than you have admitted, especially in those quiet hours when the house was still and there was no one around for you to perform strength for. You have asked whether you were simply overlooked somewhere in the great order of things, whether your life had somehow been passed over while everyone else received what they were waiting for. The answer is no. Your name is known, it has been spoken, and the decision concerning you was made in your favor before you cleaned yourself up, before you became disciplined enough, before you finally became the person you keep promising me you will be. So go and do the small thing you have been avoiding. Do not push it into tomorrow. It is smaller than you think, and it is the hinge upon which everything else turns. Then put down what you've been carrying that was never assigned to you, and take up what is yours to carry. Look at the people you love with a settled heart instead of an anxious one, because your fear for them has never been what kept them safe. My hand has. Those you carry before me in prayer are held, and they remain held whether you feel strong that day or whether you feel completely worn out. Stop treating your life as though it were a final verdict. You are standing in the middle of a chapter, and you have been trying to decide what the whole story means, while the sentence is still being written. I am not far away. I am not moving slowly, and I am not finished with you. Not remotely, and not by any measure you would recognize right now. Walk out of this moment differently than you entered it, and let the change begin with something small enough to do today, because that is where real change has always begun. I have loved you through every season when you believed you were alone. I am with you in this one, and I will be with you in the one that follows. So let that become settled deep within you, and let the word come out of your own mouth. So be it, and amen. We run on viewer support alone. If you would like to support this message, you can use the QR code or the support link in the description, and exclusive member content is available there as well. God bless you.